SkyPeAnxietyCenter.com.
I wanted to thank all of you brave souls, for coming on and having these tough conversations, uncomfortable at times, being vulnerable so that others can benefit. I know we get a lot of YouTube comments how helpful they are. And it's because of people like yourselves who are willing to talk about this, unmasking the mystery of anxiety and really putting it into the category that it is, the behavioral disorder that creates stress. The more people that get to that place, the less anxiety in the world. So I just wanted to thank you all for being so vulnerable and willing to do that.
Can I go ahead and take my turn?
You sure can.
Okay. Well, so now that I still have earworms. I guess some of the other symptoms I still have are... Okay, one of the main symptoms I still have that I get, and it comes out of nowhere and just hits me really hard, lasts for about a week, and then kind of fades into the background again, and that's depression.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, and it's always around my cycle. It's always after my cycle, though. Nothing before, nothing during, just right after, like the day after it starts. And then for a week straight, I'll have depression. And I think it was a couple nights ago where, this is going to be really uncomfortable to talk about, but I gotta just say it. So me and my husband were having husband and wife time. And immediately after we were done, I got incredibly depressed. I started crying really bad. It was very awkward because who cries after that? And I don't understand why that happened, and I don't know if that has anything to do with making you feel emotion. I don't know what I'm trying to ask, I guess, but it was very uncomfortable. It was weird. I got very, very depressed. I felt very, very sad, and I was crying, and I had this very deep, like doom or despair feeling, and I had a lot of those scary, intrusive thoughts come back in my head that I had before.
Yeah.
About dying and everything, or suicide. And so, and then the next morning I woke up and I was incredibly angry instead of sad. And it's like my emotions are just flipping everywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's normal, if it has anything to do with sex, or if it's just the time of my month. But if it is time of the month, or if I'm going to go through that every month, do I have to kind of learn to go through that every month now, that deep, deep depression and sadness and just...
Okay.
It was kind of I know that was kind of all over the place, but it was very intense.
Yeah. You described it very well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Question for you is, if you were to rate your symptoms overall in terms of their number and severity on a scale of 0 to 100%, 100% being maximum, 0, you don't have any, where would you rate your symptoms on average?
On average, probably about 50. It's not actually as bad. It's just the depression. That's the one symptom I just cannot accept. Is when I'm in it, and then when I'm out of it, or when I start to feel better, then I'm more accepting of it. You know. But when you're in that, and it's just so intense and scary that I just can't handle it. So I don't really. I guess everything else kind of just 50. It's give or take,
Okay.
And then with depression, it's pretty intense when I get those spells that just come on all of a sudden. And
are you taking any anti-anxiety or antidepressant medications?
No, but I wrote you and was I'm ready to break. That's when I've been. Okay. Yeah, because when I'm in the midst of the depression, I get scared because of the thoughts I have and the suicidal. It just scares me. I don't want to feel like that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, your average of 50% symptoms says that your body's still hyperstimulated. So it is going to behave erratically. And then when you throw the monthly cycle into the mix, it's going to be really erratic because hormones are changing. You've got hyperstimulation in the mix. And of course, hormone changing affects our moods and emotions. And so you can have really, wide swings of happiness to real sadness. And as long as your body's hyperstimulated, you can expect swings similar, not always the same, but similar every time you come to the monthly cycle. That's just how it is. Many women comment on that, especially when hyperstimulation is involved. So, and because there are so many chemicals that change due to hyperstimulation and your monthly cycle, those are kind of common. Now, the depression, are you afraid of depression?
Yeah, I kind of am.
Okay.
I'm not afraid of being sad. I'm afraid of the thoughts.
Okay.
Like, can I just give an example?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was in the kitchen the other day and I was cutting up some grapes for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the knife and, like, I don't know, just started having those thoughts of, like, self-harm. Not that I ever want to do that, because I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But they're just the thoughts that pop in. And then now every time I look at a knife, I'm kind of like a little weary, you know, or a little anxious, I guess, or just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I don't know.
You know that's a symptom, right, of hyperstimulation? The self-harm or harming others. When you talked about a knife in the drawer, I mean, that just resonated with me because I had lots of those back then. They scared the daylights out of me because I thought, well, gee, what if, I lose control and act on this? Which scared me. Yeah. These are very common. Yeah, these are very common for anxiety disorder. A lot of people have that. And it is just because of how hyperstimulation affects everything. Our thinking processes, how we feel, there's so many things going on. And we call these the crazy thoughts. That's the term that I came up with them, because they're just so out of character, but they seem so real and seem so powerful. And I struggled with that for years during the beginning of my struggle with anxiety disorder, until I realized, well, these are just another symptom of hyperstimulation. I'm not ever going to act on these. In fact, I was afraid of them because I wasn't going to act on them, and I thought I might. And that's a clear indication that it was just another symptom of hyperstimulation and, the mood swings. As you know, emotional flipping is a common anxiety disorder symptom because of how hyperstimulation affects everything. Everything you said here is pretty typical for someone who's gone through moderate and above degree hyperstimulation.
Yeah. And I'm feeling better today. Like, it just gets better by the day, but it's always that 1 week time frame. And in that week, I'm getting pretty intense symptoms.
Yep.
But most of them being depression, intrusive thoughts, pretty scary stuff. And it's like, I don't want to go through this every single week for a month. That's a long road to go down.
Well, I think the best way through that is, if your body's producing those as symptoms, it's just like, Vanessa was saying about the other one. You just come to a place where you realize, my body's, hormones are changing during this particular time. I'm never going to act on these things. In fact, I had to make a contract with myself as part of overcoming my fear of those thoughts. I said, you know what? My true self, I would never act on these. That's why they frighten me. So my contract is, no matter what kind of thoughts come into my head like that, I'm never going to do that, no matter how powerful or how strong they seem. It's just not what I'm going to do with my free will. And I contracted that with myself. And as I did that, those thoughts went away. For example, I had thoughts of, just like you said, I picked up a knife one day thinking, gee, what if I stab my kids? I love my kids. It's like, oh, that's a scary thing. One time I was driving, gee, what if I swerve my car into all these people? It's not something I'd ever do. It's just that because my body was so hyperstimulated, the thought entered my mind. I just, over the course of time would scare me. But as I contracted with myself, knew that I was still in control. I still had final say in terms of what I did, and it's not something I would ever do. Eventually, those symptoms lost their threat. So if you can treat these as just a symptom of the combination of your monthly cycle, hormones changing, and hyperstimulation, that in time these will also change too. They'll go away. Just another symptom. I'm not going to do anything about it. Yeah, it feel dark or whatever, but I'm not acting on it. You'll be fine in time. So a lot of our symptoms, we overcome them by losing our fear of them and what they mean. And if we're still afraid of them, every time we have them, of course, that fear is going to keep stressing the body. So we don't ever get through that, stress reduction period, because we're always adding to it. So this is why say, no, not doing that, contain. They feel awful and dark. It's not something I'd ever do. Never mind, it's just a symptom, and you move on. that helps us from triggering stress responses, which gives the body more time to recover. So that's what I'd suggest you do. I'm not going to suggest you're never going to have them, because it is a pretty common symptom associated with anxiety. Again, we call them the crazy thoughts. I think there. Let me just check here. It's more common than I initially thought. I think we rated that somewhere here. Let me just give me a second.
Yeah, I was talking to Stacy, and he told me to just expect them. And once he told me that, it made me feel a lot better. And then I did really good for a month. And then here comes Mrs. Period. And after Mrs. Period leaves, then here they go. And I think it's just more or less, I get really discouraged when I do so good, right? And I'm starting to I even get like a brisk moment, and I mean moment, like seconds tops of feeling like joy.
Yeah.
And then it just depletes, goes away, and I'm like, no, come back.
Yes.
And then I go through all that, and I'm doing pretty good, and then this happens again. I feel like, am I even making progress? Like I just don't know if I'm making progress or if I'm going backwards.
Yeah.
And then also a couple new symptoms came in, but they didn't scare me necessarily. They just were uncomfortable. Like the other was a couple days ago, and this was actually the night that I had that thing with my husband, and then the depression and the crying spell and all that. Earlier that day, I remember I just felt incredibly physically weak, and I went to pick up my 1-year-old to put her in the car, and I got a dizzy spell, and I fell into the door with her. And it kind of freaked me out a little bit, but I remembered what you said, and I contained my worry about it.
Good.
And then I just kind of tried to take my mind off it and talk about something else.
Yeah, good for you.
I did good with that, and I haven't had a dizzy spell since. Dizziness doesn't really scare me, but it scared me because I was holding my baby.
Right.
But yeah. And I'm like, oh no, am I going to start having dizziness now too? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Only if he latches on to the fear of it. If just like your main symptom is what you're talking about, if you had let that dizzy spell affect you and bring fear into you over it, and then you started, mulling over it and being afraid of it, it will turn into something chronic, just like any of the other symptoms. It's that's why everybody has different symptoms, that they latch onto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the main symptom that they can't seem to. Yeah. So it's good that you didn't have that fear of it, because you don't want that as a main symptom. I promise you.
Yeah.
No, I don't. I don't want depression either.
Yeah.
But see, and I don't know because so Jim, and this is what confuses me, I guess. And this is why I like your insight on it. I don't know if depression is something I'm doing to myself, or if it's like, because you say a lot of our anxiety and depression come from behavior. So I don't know if I'm making myself depressed, because I don't want to be depressed. So that can't be right. Like it's just confusing. Or is this something that my brain's kind of just doing in response to being hyperstimulated? So trying to juggle which symptom is caused by what, and if it's me doing it or if it's just my body. And that is, I think, what causes me even more stress, just not knowing the difference, not understanding all the information that you put on the website, because there's a ton of information to take on, and it's like I almost feel overwhelmed trying to take on all this and understand it. That's why I like talking. Yeah,
there's a lot of information, no question about it. And it does take time for us to see the difference between behavioral caused symptoms and stress caused symptoms, because depression can be caused by either and both. Stress is one of the most common causes. Chronic stress is one of the most common causes of feeling depressed, because stress will, again, deplete a lot of the body's resources, energy, and so on and so forth. We can also become stress hormone muted, so we're not experiencing the buzz of stress hormones, and there's a lot of things that can create physical depression. And our thoughts can do the same thing. If we're not thinking, pessimistically, then it's going to be stress. And feeling depressed is a common symptom associated with anxiety disorder and hyperstimulation, just because of how they affect the body. So in the meantime, you, what I wanted to say is you have children, correct?
Yeah, I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Yeah. Well, that's stressful.
Oh yeah,
You
they're
love them.
very.
Yeah. And you keep you going and you're in demand and you just don't have the time to do what you need to get the body settled. So your body is going to be symptomatic, stress and symptomatic, especially if the anxiety is part of the mix. You rated your symptoms at 50%. Does Stacy rate your symptoms weekly to see how you're doing overall?
Well, I don't talk to him weekly. I can't afford it, and
Okay.
now that his prices have gone up, I really can only talk to him like once a month. That's
Oh,
all I
okay.
can afford.
I
So
got you.
yeah. But when we do talk, yeah, he did that whole ratings thing, and it took us like 45 minutes, but
Yeah.
he diagnosed that minimum I'd be out of this disorder around 6 months or something,
Oh, yeah.
just to kind of give me a ballpark. But that was like the minimum.
Yeah,
So
6 months is pretty fast if the body's stressed, and especially if you have children, young little ones who are depending on you and you're at their beck and call, because that is stressful. You love them, but it's stressful.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I did talk to my husband. He has been helping out a ton more, so
Oh,
that
good.
has helped a lot.
Good. Okay, so based on all the things you've talked about, yeah, your symptoms are going to persist, earworms specifically, because if you were to rate hyperstimulation, I would assess you probably around the moderate range, and that's going to keep symptoms going for sure. Then when your cycles show up, of course, your body's going to exhibit more stress and changes. That's just how it works, so you can expect that. So for you, where you are right now, I think, this is the hard part for me is if we were just to get our stress down, we'd be fine. But we still have to live. Young families is stressful. And so we have to find ways of reducing that stress despite the stresses coming from our normal daily activities. And again, the other part of anxiety recovery, which is the most important part, is really identifying the behaviors. Because our underlying factors, level 2 recovery, is going to be the number one thing that's going to prevent us from making good recovery. Because yes, we can reduce stress, absolutely. But if we have those underlying factors and behaviors driving stress, you see how hard it's going to be to live a normal daily life, reducing your stress from those things, yet having anxious behaviors stressing the body. The progress is so slow. This is why knowing what your underlying factors are, working on them while you're doing level 1 recovery can really speed up level 1 recovery. And that's even with you having a family, because when you have healthy boundaries, you have family members helping out so you can get time to de-stress the body, you can just accelerate your recovery. But if you don't have those things, you see how it's just going to be a slow process. And then if we're afraid of symptoms, well, that fear of those symptoms, especially them coming back or getting new ones, is going to fuel everything. So it just slows everything down. So
Yeah.
I don't know how long you've been working with Stacy, if you've been able to.
Just a few months since the last time I talked to you. I went and got hold of him, and he pushed me in.
Yeah, so you're really just getting started with that.
Yeah, which, you know what? I just realized it's only been a few months, and it feels like forever. Like, I feel like I've been doing this for, like, years now.
Yeah. I know it takes a long time. Just imagine the long timers, the people who've been struggling for years and, have a long, Marguerite's a good example of having a lot of recovery work to get back from where her body was. It just takes a long time. And so where you are.
The level 2 stuff is, level 1's, I don't want to diminish it, but it's pretty straightforward, got to rest. But level 2, the behaviors that keep, you know what I'm saying? And I don't think, I'm still aware, that was what my question I was going to get to, but the level 2 stuff is not easy either, Jim.
It's not, no. And because there's emotions involved, there's changes we have to make. This is a whole nother level of recovery work in level 2, but that is where long-term success comes from. Because you're right, level 1 is really simple. Reduce stress and give your body time and it recovers. Easy peasy. But level 2 is where all that work has to occur so that level 1 can occur. And that's why, again, when we first started helping people, we thought, well, the self-help materials would be sufficient. But then you realize so many people were remaining stuck or coming back because level 2 recovery work wasn't done. And that's where we struggle. That's where we have to go after those behaviors. And you're right, Marguerite, that is sometimes really hard work. It's hard emotionally, it's psychologically, relationally a lot of times. But it is the work that sets us free. So,
Very
One of
draining
the
too. It's really draining that level 2 because I'm right now writing down. Well, I just sent him traumas from 11 to 20.
yeah,
And I'm wondering what good is it to bring up a lot of the stuff I forgot even, and
yeah.
then bringing it up has caused me more anxiety. It's like, I don't know, what good does the level 2 do if you're bringing up traumas from childhood? How does that?
Okay. Well, that's a great question. And it's one that I do want to address in today's call. But before we get there, Brianna, did you have anything you wanted to add to the symptoms and things before we move to that? Because that's a whole another piece that's really important.
yeah, I have a few other things, but so I've also been having the pulsating in my ears, and that actually went away for a little bit, or I just only really got it when I laid down,
Mm-hmm.
and now it's like for the last month it's been like there a lot. So that's another reason why I wonder if I'm making any progress really or not. But,
Yeah. This is where I used to, when I was working with clients, I would track their symptoms progress each week so they could actually see the decline. Because a lot of times we don't really have a really good subjective rating of our symptoms. They're there and we think they're awful. But as we're making progress, because things recover so slowly, we just don't think we are until we start looking back. This is where having that rating scale each week really helps the client say, oh yeah, I used to really struggle with that one and it doesn't even bother me anymore. I forgot about that one, because that will keep us heading in the right direction, knowing that the work we're doing is producing benefits. The problem, as you know, with recovery is slow and we don't see it. So we have to be continually reminded of it, and keeping these ratings over the course of time really helps in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that symptom doesn't really bother. It's annoying, but it's not like scary. I'm not afraid of it. It's just what it is. But yeah, I guess just the depression I'm afraid of, like you said, and I really hate not being able to feel things like positive. Like I can feel the negative. I feel all the negative. Oh, that's what I was gonna mention. So when I'm watching a show or something that used to bring me like would make me feel really good inside when I saw that part of a movie.
Yeah.
It's like I want to feel good, but I start like getting teary-eyed.
Yep.
It's so weird. It's like I don't want to cry at this. I know this would normally make me feel good, but for some reason it's like making me cry. Does anxiety like switch your emotions to where you want to feel this way, but instead it's producing a different emotion? Is that normal?
Yeah. Call that emotional flipping, emotional numbness. All of those are there. Very, very common. Again, I was just going to get back to the symptom we were talking about, the crazy thoughts, having those, intrusive negative thoughts and so on and so forth. 89% of people had admitted that they have that symptom. That's how common it is. We don't talk about it because it's really disturbing, but that's how common it is. Now, getting back to the emotions, I remember coming home from work one day, taking off my coat, sitting at the chair, and just bawling. And I'm thinking, why am I crying? I have no reason. I wasn't thinking of anything, and I'm just bawling. It's like, oh my gosh, this is just the weirdest thing. But that's what happens when the body becomes hyperstimulated. It affects everything, including hormones, good and bad feeling hormones. It's just what it does. And again, it's just another symptom. And because you have a 1 and a 3-year-old, and because your body is somewhat hyperstimulated, you're going to have these. That's just the way things are at the moment. So, if you can look at all the things you've talked about and say, yeah, this is just an indication my body's stressed and it still needs some, coming down. And as mentioned earlier, it takes time for the body to adjust from all the changes, having the constant demands with your kids and all those things. It's stress. We can't avoid it. So you have to find ways of how can I reduce my stress in the midst of what I have to deal with every day? Can you build in more stress reduction periods? Can you have someone come in and give you more of a hand so you're not running, 24 hours a day and all that? Let me ask you this. How's your sleep?
Oh yeah, speaking of sleep. No, I actually sleep relatively good. I sleep probably from like 10 to 6:30 when my kids wake me up.
Okay. Good.
And I still wake up and I'm like so exhausted, just so tired. I'm tired all day.
Yeah.
It's like I can't get enough sleep. And
Yep.
I feel like if I sleep too much, that's going to be counterproductive, or maybe it's not. I don't know. Like, my body's telling me, go take a nap, like, all the time, though.
Yeah.
And just like around the time of my cycle, I'll get insomnia. Like, I'll wake up frequently throughout the night. I'm only getting like 6 hours, 5 hours of sleep for like 7 days straight. And then my sleep will kind of return back to normal.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah. Well, and so you see the degree that the cycle has on hyperstimulation.
Yeah. Like, and I've never, ever, ever had problems with period. Like, never. I was actually one of those lucky women who a lot of other women hated because I never had cramps. I never had insomnia. I never had headache. Like, nothing. Just don't even know it's there. Comes and goes. And now it's like I'm getting all of it. Yeah. So.
And that's, again, a good indication if your stress is still up. So, and you have good reason for it. That's the thing. In terms of managing symptoms, if you can just chalk them up to symptoms, it's just my body's stressed, my hormones are all over the map. Oh, well. I'm not going to act on any of these things. That's why I'm afraid of it. So I'm going to contract with myself. No matter what happens, I'm not going to do it. Just let it pass. Keep working on your stress reduction. And go ahead. Sorry.
So then once your body becomes so out of whack, how does it know how to go back to a normal state? Like, how, if my hormones are just always out of whack around the same time every month, how are they going to know how to regulate to where they don't do this to me anymore?
And this is where the value of regular deep relaxation is helpful, because when the body becomes hyperstimulated, it becomes a wild animal. It just does whatever it wants. And so by us regularly teaching it to be relaxed and calm, we train the body in terms of what to do. If you remember the comment about homeostasis learns day after day how the body's supposed to be managed. When it becomes hyperstimulated, it just realizes that it's all over the map, and that's what it does. So as we calm down and teach the body to be calmer, homeostasis then tries to keep the body calmer. It reduces stress hormones over the course of time. And over the course of time, we teach it to be calmer. So it is educating the nervous system and body how to get back to its normal place, but it knows how to get there when we continue to teach it. So if we're continuing to teach it to be anxious and stressed and symptomatic, well, that's what it's going to follow suit. It's going to keep those hormone levels and stress hormones where they think the body needs to be. But as we teach it to be calmer, it teaches it to be calmer, and the body does adjust. So the body will go back to functioning normally when we get it back there. But until then, it's all over the map.
Yeah.
Okay. They taught us in school that the body always wants to be at homeostasis. It's always trying to be at homeostasis.
Yep.
Like, that's why sepsis is so hard to treat. Well, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why
it's always going to homeostasis.
Yeah. And hyperstimulation will create homeostatic dysregulation, which means that the homeostatic balance doesn't know where to go. And so that's why we need to teach it by teaching us to be calm.
Well, yeah, because the parasympathetic nervous system gets so suppressed, it can't go to homeostasis.
Yep.
And I still also get those like pessimistic thoughts, but they're so random, and they're usually, again, around that same time with everything else. So
like some of the fatigue I think I felt was my parasympathetic nervous system finally showing up.
Yeah.
I just thought that for some reason, even now, it's like, well, my parasympathetic nervous system is coming in big finally,
Yeah. And that's why people feel depressed and tired all the time, because the body is trying to get back to where it thinks it needs to go. So then what do we do as anxious people? Oh my gosh, I'm depressed. Oh my gosh, I'm tired. Oh my gosh, this shouldn't be this way. Because we think we should have that, center line level of energy and enthusiasm when we want it. But yet the body's trying to get us back to a place of being calmer. So we want to indulge those, low episodes. Indulge the fact that it wants to sleep whenever you can, because that's what the body needs.
So
that was the advice you gave me when I first started in therapy, and I've kept true to that, Jim. If I need to lay down, I go lay down.
Yep, you bet. Yeah, because eventually your body will get back to. Eventually, your body will get back to that normal balance where you have that optimum, level of energy and tiredness when you want it. But until then, it's going to be tired, and it needs to be.
Well, unfortunately, I think I've been on raw adrenaline my entire life. I think this is a new frontier for my body.
I would agree. Yeah.
So, there's no such thing as oversleeping, like sleeping too much.
Not at this particular time. I mean, if we're sleeping all the time and the body's getting really good periods of balance of energy, and then we're sleeping, we want to get to that. I guess what researchers call that sort of baseline of what's the right range, and that's between 6.5 to 8 hours every night. Anything over is probably not good for us, and anything under is probably not good for us. But the problem is that
I like the article you put up today on the question forum. Did the article I don't know if you had a chance, Brianna, to look at the question forum or whatever you call it. I don't know what you call it, but he put up a question to all this today in the anxiety center.
Oh, no, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's got good information.
That's the one that says, why can depression come out of the blue and like a panic attack? And it does, it does explain a lot of what happens there, and it's pretty typical for what we go through. So that's a good thing to read it. But for where you're at now, just accept that these are going to happen. If you're feeling down and blue, that's because what your body's doing hormonally and physically through hyperstimulation. But if you can find ways to really try to start working at that stress and getting it down, that would really help turn this around.
Okay. And I noticed actually that night when I had the episode, and I just bawled my eyes out for like a whole hour straight. My eyes hurt, but I felt relief. Like I really felt better. Like not great, not like I didn't even feel as good as I do now, but I felt better. It felt good to cry. And I don't cry.
Yeah.
I did have a month there where I cried all the time, straight through, like never stopped crying, but that went away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt good to cry. Does sex have anything to do with making you feel depressed or anxious or anything? I'm just curious.
It can, because hyperstimulation can affect sex in two ways: increase desire or decrease it. Can also have results where you feel great joy after or great depression after. Just depends.
Now, why is that? Why do you feel depression? I usually only felt joy before. I've never had this happen to me, so it was just weird.
I guess it just depends on how the body's going to be managing. Let's go back. Homeostasis means that the body's managing a whole lot of chemistry and levels constantly, moment by moment. It's always doing adjusting up and down and balancing. Well, and that works great when the body's not hyperstimulated because it knows where baseline is. It does a good job of getting there. The systems, organs, and glands are functioning normally, so it's quite easy to get there. But when we hyperstimulate the body, well, that all goes out of whack. It doesn't sometimes know where to go. Sometimes it'll increase hormones or chemicals in one direction, and we feel really overly excited where we can't really contain ourselves. Another time we can be so depressed it just feels like we can't even move a muscle. Low moods. It'll just be all over the place, and that's what homeostatic dysregulation does. It can mismanage the hormonal balances between all the various hormones, creating emotions that are just unusual. And so you could have had just one of those episodes where after, because the body goes through a series of endorphins and things during sexual intercourse, and after the release, the body has to adjust. And if you don't have a good homeostatic balance, it can go in any direction it chooses. And for you that particular time, it could be really sad. But this is where, again, we have to be good with whatever the body does and not react to it with fear and distress. Crying is cathartic. Crying has great value in certain applications. We don't want to be crying all the time because that's stressful too. But it's very cathartic, and sometimes we just need a good cry, especially as females, because you're more emotionally wired than men are. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to become upset and question and worry about the symptoms we get, because that just keeps us there stressing the body. That's why that passive acceptance, again, is so important. So my body's hyperstimulated. It's going to be doing these things. In my cycle, my hormones going to be all over the map. Oh, well, I'll deal with it the best we can. What I wanted to add here, my wife is really good at managing her hormone swings. She's got to be the most balanced, emotional woman that I've met. She's emotional. And one of the reasons she had to work at managing her emotional reactions to what her hormones are doing is because she had some medical issues going on early in her life. And they did some surgeries to what they thought would fix that, but it didn't. And so she's had to mentally manage those things. And so she just learned at an early age not to blow emotional steam over anyone else because her body was feeling a certain way. Now, the good news is because we can manage our thoughts and emotions cognitively, we still have that free will control. We can even get into that place where even though we don't feel emotionally balanced or well or whatever, we can still cognitively override it or contain it so that the feelings aren't driving our reactions, but our thoughts are. And as you know, from an anxiety standpoint, we have complete control over anxiety because we can control how we react to those strong feelings of hyperstimulation where we're not feeling them. And the same thing happens with this, and this is why in this particular case, if you're having these up and down depressive periods, looking at them rationally, cognitively, containing yourself, passively accepting, identifying that they're related to hyperstimulation and hormone changes due to the cycle, not reacting to them, you'll find that you'll become less bothered by them. And in time, you won't look forward to those monthly cycles as being really bad. You'll say, oh, whatever shows up, I'll deal with, no big deal. And this is where you can get to with practice.
Okay, so just trying to contain, even though I'm going through the depth of it, just kind of.
Yep.
And that's so hard to do, but I'll keep trying to do that.
Yeah. When you talked about, you mentioned watching a show and there should be a nice emotional payoff, and yet you get there, and I remember that exactly. It's like, I have no response to that. I should be feeling this way. I don't feel anything. Or other times it was like, I feel the complete opposite of how I should feel. What the heck is going on? And that's hyperstimulation.
Okay, so good indicator I'm still hyperstimulated. See, and that's another thing. I don't know if I'm still hyperstimulated. Well, I know I still have symptoms, so I know I am a little bit, but I guess I forget that I'm hyperstimulated. And I think that all these symptoms are because of me, because of the whole behavior section. I guess I just misunderstood. I'm misunderstanding the behavioral stuff.
Yeah, and that's, if we're going to have this conversation, probably, within one of the next two questions, but it's a really good one to listen to because it is super important, because I totally understand where you're trying to figure out what's behavior and what's physical. And maybe the next conversation will help illuminate that.
Brianna, that's what happened to me, but for me, it was like not a show. It was like, oh, I'm so excited to go to Disneyland. Like, that's like the happiest place. Like, I know I'm not going to feel the disconnection over there because I never used to feel it on vacations. And then as soon as I got there, it was like, boom, it was there. And then that led me to feeling sadness and depressed that first day. And then I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, so when I got back home, I was just like, I can't believe that happened. And it was making me sad to think about it. But then I was like, you know what? It's okay. Like Jen says, I'm just hyperstimulated. You and I both have really young kids. Like we should, honestly, you should give yourself so much credit because we don't see how strong we are as women. And just having a baby and going through this is like, we're just going to come out even stronger. I feel, even though we get those episodes, I really do feel like people with anxiety are like one of the strongest people in the world. Like, they have no idea what we go through, people that don't deal with anxiety. No. Like, it's really hard.
Amen, sister.
Yeah.
Amen.
So I just feel like, you know what? It happened. And I feel like for me, I was like, what did I learn from this? Like, instead of seeing it, because I kept dwelling on it, and I was like, there's something that I had to learn from it, and I think if we see it as like a good perspective, like we put a perspective to it, like, and see it in a way as like, there was something that my body was telling me, we're just so hard on ourselves sometimes, I feel, and we're very strong, and I'm so grateful for you, Jem, because I feel without you and the therapist that you have, the professional therapist that you have that tries so hard to make us understand. And we're here like, but you don't understand. And and they do, they really do, because they've all been through it. And it's like, I'm really just so grateful for all of you and for you, Jim, and for your team. And, I just wanted to point that out, Brianna, because I'm in the same page. I can relate to you when it comes to hormones and periods. And I feel way worse prior to my period. So totally understand.
I get the post stuff, so I feel like a weirdo. Like, I'm different from everyone else because most women have it pre-menstrual and I have it post-menstrual. I'm like,
I get it. You know, it's funny. I get it 1 week prior, and then when my period's here, I'm okay. And then after my period, I get it again. It's weird.
yes, that's what happens to me. Oh my God. You're like
Really?
a twin. I swear to God. Me and you are like anxiety twins. That's what we're going to be. The same stuff.
Yeah, that's what happens to me. And it never used to hit me like that before.
Well, that feels so much more reassuring because, again, with the earworm video, you're like the first person, let alone woman, that I found that went through it. And I honestly, I haven't dealt with it in a while. And if I do, like Jen says, I'll get like, oh, there it is. Oh, well, it's not a big deal. And then it's like my mind now made it into a habit. It literally connected like these neurons in my brain where it's like, oh, well, you know, it did. Yeah. So it'll happen to you. Okay, good. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to things again. I can't wait for that. Come back online.
And you will. Yeah, and you will. It's just time. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate everything she said. I agree. I'm 100% ditto with her.
Oh, you are more than welcome. I mean, we've been there. We hated it. That's why we help others.
Me too, Jim. Me too. I don't know where I would have. I just broke down on Stacy a few sessions ago. I said I have no idea what would have happened to me if I wouldn't have got with Anxiety Center. And I mean, I tried different therapists, and that they were just not able. I mean, they weren't qualified.
Yeah.
I got one worse therapist after another. They seemed to get worse. You know, I did have one neurological psychologist that was awesome. I didn't have her for very long, but she was amazing. Everything you talk about the Anxiety Center, she taught me, except she was more philosophical. Like she would say, you have to teach your brain to not be afraid of the symptoms, but to see the symptoms as messengers. Just like if you hurt yourself or you put your hand on a hot stove or something, she said, try to see them as messengers. And you do that, Jim. I mean, Stacy even talks about that. He says when he gets kind of weepy, he knows got to dial it down.
Yeah. We all have those key stress symptoms that raise their head when we let our stress go up. Yeah. Jeez.